Good evening, everybody. Ms.Tanja Gönner, Chair of the Management Board, and I won't pronounce this, I'll just say GIZ, with apologies. I don't think I can say Deutsche, but, but the German Institute for Development, the Chair, and as Dr. Aluwalia was here just a while ago and she excused, she's very sorry she can't be here, and she was saying, she was telling Ms. Gönner, I was looking for somebody a little older than you because you're a minister, or you were a minister, and therefore I was looking for somebody older. So that was a tribute to what you have accomplished. I'm not going to read out the CV. It's in your packets. That will just duplicate what is already there. So please have a look at the very big accomplishments, the great accomplishments of our speaker tonight. I will just say that she's the chair of the management board of GIZ, with whom ICRIER has worked in the past, and we've had very productive collaboration with GIZ, and we will continue, I envisage, to work with them in the future. Most of you know about ICRIER, but just a few words, and then I will hand over to Ms. Gönner for the talk on, as you know, on Indo-German international cooperation for sustainable development, a very important topic. ICRIER has slowly begun, most of you know ICRIER, so we do a lot of work on international cooperation, strategic relations, but of late we have started to work in the area of sustainable development, which we think is going to be one of the important areas in the future. And we do a substantial amount of work with Germany, given our interests in doing research on trade issues and on the BTIA. We've written many papers. If you go to our website, BTIA with the EU is the bilateral trade and investment agreement with the EU, and we've written a number of papers in that. They are all available on our website. And with Germany in specific, we have done work on the services agreement, we've done work on FDI, and we continue to engage with Germany in research. And in fact, even as I speak, two of our researchers are sitting in Germany today for stakeholder consultations on a project that ICRIER is doing with Germany. So I'm delighted that we are able to get Ms. Gönner to speak to us today. Just a few words on the work that ICRIER has started on sustainable development and improving resource efficiency of the inputs that go into the production process. We've started work on cities, and there are 4 cities that we are working on and looking at the impact of extreme events on the competitiveness on those cities, and trying to make a case for improving public and private investment for adaptation to extreme events on climate change. And this study, which will be out within the next few months, is looking at Surat, Pune, Ludhiana, and Kochi as case studies, making a case for, especially for adaptation as a result of extreme events, and trying to incentivize public and private investments for adaptation. Another study that we are going to launch hopefully very soon centers around how we can drive efficiency of resource use across key sectors, especially in agriculture, and then back to cities, and also in the area of energy demand management. And I won't go into the details of these studies, but let me just mention at the broad level that in agriculture, if we incentivize better resource use, it can have a big impact on emissions. Just getting, I'm not saying you get exactly market prices, but market-oriented prices for energy systems can bring in a lot of efficiency. And if you do the same thing in not only in agriculture, but also in transport demand management, you look at the congestion around you in cities, and if you are able to use the price signals to be able to make demand more rational, then you can have immediately an impact on emissions and therefore on the environment. So these are the studies. I'm giving you an indication of the kind of research that ICRIER is going to be engaged in today and is likely to be engaged in the future, which is closely related to the topic that the former minister is going to speak on today. But I don't want to spend more time and take away the time from Ms. Gönner's speech. But once again, a very warm welcome to all of you, and a very warm welcome to Ms. Gönner for the first time in India and in ICRIER. We are very privileged that you're here, and we look forward to your talk. Thank you very much.
So, Mr. Katuri, distinguished representatives of leading Indian and international cooperation partners, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, thank you very much for the warm welcome. It is a pleasure to be here, and I am delighted to be here. And as you mentioned, it is my first visit to India. And I like to be here in India, and I wish to thank you for this wonderful opportunity to talk to you tonight. This is the fourth day of the first visit. You see, at the first visit, you count the days, but I'm sure it will not be the last visit in India, and this I'm sure I can say after this 4 days. I would therefore also like to thank all people who were involved in organizing my visit, because I had a very interesting program in the last 4 days, and I'm sure I will have a very interesting program tomorrow. And thanks to our friends from ICRIER for hosting this event. What I have seen over the past few days, for example, during my visit to the Multi-Skill Development Center in Karnataka on Monday, or the National Health Insurance Program this morning, has confirmed my opinion that our cooperation has reached a new level. At the same time, I recall a few comments I heard when I was preparing for this trip. Why are you going to India? People asked. And what is GIZ still doing in India? As an emerging economy and an important G20 member country, it can deal with its own challenges, development, poverty, and environment itself. So people said, so why should GIZ still work here? Well, I think there are quite a few reasons, and what I have seen over the past few days has confirmed my opinion. Indeed, a traditional donor-recipient relationship doesn't make much sense anymore, even though poverty persists. However, there are many reasons why we should continue our successful collaboration, although we do need to adapt our philosophy of cooperation, and I will also say the wording. In the next, I hope, 30 minutes, I would like to explain why GIZ prefers to speak of international cooperation for sustainable development instead of development cooperation. And I would like to take a closer look at our joint activities in order to explore what international cooperation for sustainable development means in practice. Let me start with some basic information about GIZ before I continue with my main topic. GIZ is a public benefit German enterprise. Our sole shareholder is the Federal Republic of Germany, which is represented by the Federal Ministry of Economic Cooperation and Development, BMZ, and the Federal Ministry of Finance. Despite being federally owned, GIZ is organized as a company. We do not receive any institutional funding. Instead, our funding comes from our projects and commissions. We are commissioned primarily by the German government and also by international organizations, governments across the world, and the business community. The skills development project I visited in Bangalore, for example, was commissioned by the state of Karnataka. GIZ's mandate is to support the German government in achieving its own objectives in the field of international cooperation for sustainable development. We are active in more than 130 countries around the world, roughly 80% of our 60,000 employees work in projects abroad. Of those, about 70% are employed locally as national personnel. Those of you who were familiar with the three predecessor organizations which the German government decided to merge to form GIZ at the beginning of 2011 might have noticed that we uncrossed the T in GTZ to turn it into an I in GIZ. This little change is not just a spelling issue, it stands for a new understanding of how to confront today's challenges, namely through international cooperation. The world is changing quickly. Today we live in a truly globalized and multipolar world. Goods, services, and capital flow across national boundaries and continents. As a result of global value chains, the division of labor has become completely international. Skilled workers migrate from continent to continent, and thanks to the internet, digital connectivity is increasing rapidly. At the same time, we are seeing a global shift in wealth and power. Emerging countries like India are gaining significant economic and political influence and are in fact reclaiming the position in the world economy that they held before the Industrial Revolution. Your nation is an important player both regionally and globally and has a say in the way world affairs are conducted. As a result of these changes, we can no longer really talk about the North and the South or West and the rest. Finally, many of the challenges we face today can only be tackled at global level. Issues like climate change, resource security, demographic transition, migration, financial stability, and even defeating poverty cannot be dealt with at national level alone. The current debate within the United Nations and the international community about a new post-2015 development agenda reflects this challenge. As you all know, the debate has two strands. The post-MDG debate on the one hand and the discussion about the Sustainable Development Goals on the other. Both of these will hopefully be merged into one single post-2015 agenda for poverty reduction and global sustainable development. In my opinion, an important issue is the universality of the agenda. The goals which still have to be agreed upon by the international community are expected to apply to developing, emerging, and industrialized countries. This means that industrialized countries are required not only to act as donors who support the fight against poverty in developing countries, but also to implement changes in their own countries in order to promote global sustainable development. This is what is meant by the principle of common but differentiated responsibility. Common goals and obligations, however, will change the way people, and I will say countries, cooperate. In my opinion, the traditional donor-recipient relationship needs to be replaced by a new partnership for mutual benefit, which would also foster the attainment of global objectives like climate change mitigation. This brings me back to the question of the definition, or perhaps it would be better to say the scope of international cooperation for sustainable development. Not so long ago, we used to talk about development aid. In recent years, the terminology has changed to development cooperation. Think back to the last high-level forum on aid effectiveness in Busan at the end of 2011. Both aid and development cooperation were characterized by a unilateral transfer of resources and know-how from an industrialized nation to a developing country with the fundamental aim of reducing poverty. This unilateral way of thinking was the norm, irrespective of whether it was intended or understood as a compensation for earlier wrongdoing by the West. But it led, involuntary, to a relationship with patronizing traits. I believe that we have now left this behind. The understanding of development cooperation has broadened and changed. Today, it is also one of many different forms and areas of international cooperation. This trend is reflected in our name, GIIs, which stands for Promoting International Cooperation for Sustainable Development. So, what is different? Taking Germany and India as an example, what are the characteristics of international cooperation for sustainable development? Firstly, our cooperation today is based on mutual interests and leads to a win-win situation. Secondly, the exchange of experience and knowledge has become a central element of our cooperation. Exchange here is not just one way, but goes in both directions. India-German cooperation focuses on the thematic fields in which India has expressed a desire for support and in which Germany is considered to have comparative advantages. Let me start with our mutual interests. I believe that our two nations have a lot to discuss and a lot to learn from each other. I believe that the main pressing issues of the global agenda can only be solved by cooperation, and that bilateral cooperation between India and Germany, in parallel to multilateral and global efforts, can contribute much to solving or easing global challenges such as climate change, reducing our carbon footprint, defeating poverty, managing migration, using resources efficiently, and fostering peace and security. Let me give you an example which was raised in the course of my visit over the last 4 days. I was told that every Indian family wants a two-wheeler, and those who have a two-wheeler want a four-wheeler. No one can deny these aspirations. But what will this do to the planet? Where can we find the resources to enable India and other nations in Asia to fulfill their aspiration as consumers? India is the most densely populated part of the earth, home to 17% of the world's population, but with only 2% of the global landmass. Smart solutions need to be found both in India and in Germany, and maybe we can combine our efforts to do so. Today, per capita use of resources such as water, minerals, land, energy, the list goes on, is highest in North America and lowest in emerging and poor countries. Europe is in the middle. But the incremental use of resources, that is, the amount of resources used for every additional step of growth, is highest in Asia. Asia uses more resources for every new additional percentage of growth than any other part of the world. I think we all agree that this growth path is not sustainable enough. The development path could and should be much more resource efficient. And the benefits here would be threefold. Firstly, a more resource efficient growth. Wasting resources increases costs, limits the competitiveness of businesses, creates great problems for the future generations, and leads to competition for water, land, and raw materials, which in turn sparks conflict. Secondly, a more resource-efficient growth path would also benefit Germany, as we have technologies and coping strategies that could be adapted for use in India. As a former Ministry of Environment of a federal state in Germany, I believe that by working with others, we can use resources more efficiently and foster sustainable and inclusive growth, which is the theme underpinning India's development policy.